and welcome to Impact 2026, our continuing conversation where we talk about all different types of topics. We talk about anything you want to talk about current events, race, religion, everything that's going on in the world. And we talk about it from a Christian perspective. And so, this is the opportunity that you have to join in on the conversation. You can type your questions and your comments into the comment section, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. And feel free. You type them in, it will pop up on the screen. We will address it. And so that's the way this goes. We want to make sure that you have the opportunity to participate in the conversation. So we're interested in what you think. So please feel free to type your questions and comment into the comment section. We'd like to remind people of the other offers that we have here on Thursdays at 7 o'clock here on Facebook and YouTube. We have Thursday Thirst. It's our weekly Bible study. It's a good time to definitely come in and learn a little bit more about the Bible. On Sundays at 10 o'clock, we have worship service, 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so that's also on Facebook and YouTube and on the address that you can see right here on our screen. So if you're in the local area, please feel free to come in and join us. And then on Tuesdays, that's today, at 7 o'clock, we have a time of prayer from 7 to 7:45. So please join us. If you're praying then, you're praying with the ministry. And so sometime between 7 to 7:45, it doesn't matter if it's, a little while, if it's the majority of the time, as long as you pray sometime in that time frame, you're praying with the ministry. And of course, at 8 o'clock, we have Impact 2026 that you are at right now. And so let's talk about what's going on out here. The new year has started. It is 2026, as you already know. A couple of little things that have happened. We just had Martin Luther King Day. So a time to reflect on his life and the movement that he was a part of, the civil rights movement, and some of the advances that we were able to make as African Americans, and it's just people, period, because people forget that as a part of the movement, it also addressed other issues. So it was inequalities, but not just inequalities of race, but other inequalities as well. But as we reflect on the different things that we were able to gain and the things that recently we have lost. So just a remembrance of those, all of those who sacrificed so much for us to be here today. And so that is just passed. But ironically, closely lined up is the issue that we're talking about today. Back in Minneapolis, back where they're having the protest because an ICE agent killed a protester, suspected protester, Miss Good, which was shot and killed by an ICE officer. And so because of this, there have been additional protests, also additional officers. But specifically what we're going to talk about today is a question that comes close to the church's heart. And what happened over the past week was that people found out that an ICE agent was a pastor at a church. And so what they decided to do was to then go to the church during their service and basically protest by being loud and saying certain things. And if you basically talking about the fact that how are you an ICE agent and you're a pastor. And so if you listen to the people who kind of participated in the protest, they talk about the fact that, how can you come here on Sunday and be in a position of leadership, but yet you are an ICE agent, a field agent. So you start, he helps to organize some of the actions that they go out and do. And so that was their contention. And so that was their thing. Now, the government wants to, they've been talking harsh. They've been talking tough talk, saying that what they did was inappropriate. This is not, you're not exercising your freedom of speech, but you have now crossed over into the area of doing an illegal action. They're using different acts. One's called the FACE Act, and the other one is the KKK Act. They're trying to use those to be able to prosecute these people, arrest them for criminal actions. Basically, what those acts were designed to do, especially the second one, was that they're designed to protect religious institutions from people trying to intimidate and trying to use those, because of the KKK, it's called the KKK act because of the Klan and some of the actions that they try to do towards churches. And so what is set up to do is that you can't come in and disrupt services or religious activities in the name of protesting, in the name of in the name of protesting, or in the name of trying to disrupt things in order to kind of have like a, not like a boycott, but just you can't disrupt services. And so that's what the heart of what's going on with the acts. And so the federal government is now trying to use that in order to prosecute these protesters. Not because they you know, because the protesters did anything crazy. It's more so because it's embarrassing, and they're trying to send a clear message against the whole people who come against ICE agents as a whole. But it's a discussion point for us, because as people of faith, we have to sit back and and have to discuss, how bad is it that these folk came into the church and disrupted the service by calling out the ICE agent as a pastor. And that's more so the discussion point. Because you sit back as the church, and we have to talk about it. We got a lot of people in the church, and we have a lot of people who are in different positions, whether they're pastors, deacons, deaconess, trustees, whatever. Whatever. We have a lot of people in the church, and we have a lot of people who have a lot of different jobs, and those jobs sometimes require folk to do things that other people may not like. Now, should they be able to be called out? And should the community and different people be able to sit back and question you of how dare you, or how can you sit here and represent this on Monday through Friday, and then on Sunday you want to represent Christ? Like, explain yourself. How can these two different things work themselves out? Is that appropriate? Now, the second part of the question is how they did it. Is that appropriate? You're coming in and you're disrupting service. You're coming in and you're heckling or you're chanting against someone while service is going on. Now, this particular person is not the head pastor, is one of the pastors, but and wasn't delivering a sermon at the time. But you come in and you're disrupting church. It's interesting to see different people's thoughts on this. The protesters, as many of them have noted, because some of them have been interviewed and they've talked, are basically saying, "Hey, look, if you're not being true to the faith, then I'm not disrupting anything, because y'all are, you're frauds from the get-go, from the jump." Others are saying, they're really not even talking about the legality of it. They're just saying, well, they're talking about the fact that we protested, but they're not talking about what we protested about. And so they're trying to defend those activities. But it's a question of, what do you think about it? And so we got a comment here. At least they did not blow up the church, killing persons. However, given that they had information pointing to the pastor as a leader in ICE, they should have just exposed him and not interrupted the services. Yeah, I think that's the question point of, is it okay to interrupt service? Now I'll let you know. For me personally, I've been some places and heard some things during the service where I'm just like, this is crazy. And you want, when you hear some crazy stuff, or you sometimes you be like, hey, that I don't know, that don't seem right. And you want to be able to say that. And so I think that the plan of disrupting service may not have worked, may not have been a good idea. Right? But talking during service, I think, would be quite all right. If you're going to show up on Sunday, if we're going to go to the church on Sunday, and we're going to confront and address as the person is talking or during the service, like, how are you going to be up here doing this and, doing that, when in reality you're out here trying to persecute people and and hurt people? And how are you loving your neighbor? And how are you taking care of those who are needy? And you're out here trying to do these things. I think that if you came in on Sunday and you asked that question legitimately during service, I think that's okay. I don't think that there's any issue with that. But if your whole goal is just, let's just shut this thing down, let's be loud and let's disrupt so nothing can go on, I do think that that's a different ballgame. I do think that that's inappropriate for a religious a religious place, because you get into a sticky situation, especially when we talk about history of what has gone on in the past, whether it be Christian churches, whether it be synagogues, whether it be mosque. It gets real sticky and real weird when people talk about protesting and doing other things in religious houses. A lot of violence has gone on over the history, especially here in the United States, and so those need to be safe places. And so a protest, a sit down, going in to disrupt inside of a church, I don't think that's the right move. And so I agree with this comment here. You probably need to expose the person, and I would even say more so to have that conversation. And I think you're in 100% within your rights. That during the service, you're like, look, I need to ask a question. How are you up here on the stage, on the dais, on the pulpit, whatever you want to say? How are you up here today when you support the foolish actions? Not even support. You participate in the foolish actions that are going on during the course of the week. Now, if you want to pose that question on a Sunday while service is going on, I think you're right. But to try to stop service, to try to intimidate, maybe to try to disrupt in a manner to make people feel uncomfortable, I think that's crossed the line. I think that's across the line. And so as we talk about this, and yes, these people may end up being prosecuted, which is, it is what it is on that one. I think their minds may not have been in the right place when you're sitting back thinking about, well, what's going to make sense? Now, here's what they did do. We talking about it, and so many more people are talking about it as well. So if that was their goal, you got that accomplished. But I don't think that it's especially I'll talk about me as a person of color. There's been too much violence. When I look back at our history, there's too much violence that's happening to churches and to people in churches, that I don't think that kind of intimidation is not, or that kind of action, it's problematic. I think it's problematic. We'll comment from a Christian standpoint. This is not first a legal matter. It's a moral tragedy. Yeah. I think that's that's right there. It is. So it's not a legal matter. It's about what's morally right and morally wrong. What's morally right and morally wrong. And so, we talk about these protesters. I talk about the way I talk to my son. I'd be like, listen, if you're right, be right. But don't be right and then make yourself wrong. And so for the protesters, if you're right, at the end of the day, if you feel that you're right, and I agree with a lot of what the protesters are talking about, I do. I am on the board. I am on the side of what's morally right and what's morally wrong. You can't be intimidating people out here, ICE agents. You don't need to be harassing folk, ICE agents. You don't need to be roughing folk up, ICE agents. You don't need to be chasing down people who, when as the government claim, we're looking for immigrants without the proper paperwork who have committed crimes. But you don't need to be going after people who are just violent crimes, let me say that, or significant crimes, not misdemeanors. Grabbing up people who got parking tickets and things like that. If that's what you say that you're going to do, you need to do that and not be just going out here breaking people's windows, busting into people's houses all hours of the night, because these are what's been reported, pulling people out of their homes. That's not right. And as a pastor, if you are the pastor, and this is your job, you got to decide who you're going to serve. Because you can't do, I feel like you can't do both. You can't be a pastor on Sunday and then during the week, and how you get your paycheck and how you make a living and what you say that you're proud of, you out here cutting up, not following the word. So you got to make a choice. And so, but again, the method by what they use going into the church, again, for me, because again, I'm, and I don't know how many of these protesters, black people who knew their history, because as soon as you come to me and be like, hey, let's protest through the church, let's go up in there and let's cause a funk and shut down service. I'm like, look, no, we're not going up into no religious houses, because that's the first thing that people who want to cause terror do. They bomb churches. They spray paint nasty messages on churches. It's hate groups. That's what they use. That's the method that they use, is go to your religious houses. That's where they want to go to. And so if you're protesting and you're on the right side of it, you can't use the same tactics as those who start to push across hate. When authority destroys life unnecessarily, it falls out of alignment with God's purpose. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good one. So when you're talking about the situation that's happening out there with the ICE agent killing the person, the authority, the people who are in authority, the people who are in charge are advocating for killing, are making excuses for the killing, are putting people in positions that these killers can go through. It definitely falls out of line. It falls out of line, and I think that's what's going on. We all out of whack. It's all out of whack, and there's people. Man, I had a guy who talked to me the other day, and he was like, "Man, I promise you this." He's like, "Man, I'm not racist, and I'm not hating on people, but we gotta follow the laws and the rules, and we gotta get the people out of here that don't supposed to be here from different countries, that don't got their paperwork. We just gotta do the right thing and get all these folk out, and every other country does it." And just try to explain to me and justify why his position was what his position was, and why he supported, cracking down on immigration and doing all these things. And you know what? For the most part, I think you're kind of fine, except for the fact that authority is destroying lives unnecessarily, as it says in this comment. And that's what's falling out of alignment. And that's why, even if you agree, like the person was trying to explain to me, even if you agree with the overall idea of ICE, the overall idea of enforcing the immigration laws, the problem that you have is you're not trying to do that. You're out here trying to destroy lives. They're not trying to find people who are out here breaking the laws. They're snatching people up as they go to the courthouse to check in on their immigration status. They're out here snatching people up and trying to throw them out who have come here seeking asylum because the place that they came from is not safe for them and their family. They're over here trying to rip people who have whole entire families here. They have children who are citizens. They may have a spouse that's a citizen, and they're just ripping them out and taking them out. And again, these are not folk with criminal records. They just pull them because they want to pull them. They are intentionally trying to install fear in the community. And as it says right here, just destroying lives unnecessarily. And it's falling out of line. How can we, again, back to that pastor, how are you going to sit here and you're going to talk about the love of God and loving one another, and then you're going to turn around and be a part of, let's go ahead and rip these people out of, and I get it. They're not the ones calling the shots. The ICE agents are not the ones calling the shots about who they're going to get and who they're not going to get. But you're working for that. That's what you're doing. A little shot. I'm going to take it to ICE agents. Most of these people are folk who are not in law enforcement. They talked about their training, and they talked about what they had to go through. These ICE agents are not qualified in law enforcement, most of them. Some of them are former law enforcement, some of them former military, some of them just, people who be out here. But they don't have the qualifications that law enforcement has. So as much as we get on law enforcement for what they do, these folk are a far step below. And so they're not even qualified and don't have a really understanding of the differences between what's right and wrong. They don't have the moral standing or the training and the understanding of, hey, what should I do and what I shouldn't do. And when I say the moral standing that should be taught. So you have your morals, but there's also, this is the morals of the department of what we were taught. So not your personal morals, but the departmental morals, or the policy that's based on in a little bit of morality. There's nothing taught there. And so you got a bunch of people out here who just wow, and really don't have it. And that's a part of the struggle. Another comment: Christ never gave leaders permission to act without conscience, and that's the thing. You can't sit back here and blame stuff. You're right. I think that hits it right there too. You can't sit back here and blame stuff on the job. You can't blame stuff on leadership. You can't blame stuff on others. Every one of us has to take responsibility for our own actions. And so as much as, and again, as much as I 100% disagree, I 100% disagree with going into the church and protesting. What I don't disagree with is the fact that they called out this pastor for being a part of ICE in this particular environment. And if you joined up ICE before as a pastor and you were like, oh, this is what I'm doing and what we're going through and we're protecting people and doing that, blah, 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 blah. But now you can no longer do that. And now you have to step back and make a choice. And now you can't blame it on anybody else, especially as a pastor. You can't be a leader in the church and then all of a sudden say, well, you're not a leader in life. And so I think that one of the greatest things that protest did was it called out attention to people like that. And I think that's, if there's anything we take away from it, one, don't do what they did. But two, we need to kind of, ask each other. We don't have to take each other to task, but we do need to ask each other, like, well, what you doing over there? I heard ICE is acting up like your grandma used to do. I don't know how your grandma, but I can tell you how my grandma used to do. If she thought something was going on crazy, she gonna ask you about it in a nice little way, like, boy, what you doing on over there? I heard some things was a little funny over there. Tell me, explain to me what's going on. And I think that that's what we may need to be doing to one another. Is let's talk this through. Explain to me how this works with your faith. Explain to me how you just heard what was preached on Sunday, and you about to go out here and do such and such on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Explain to me how this works. Like, you sure you feel comfortable with that? Are we in alignment here? I'm looking at it the wrong way. Just let's talk this through. And I think that may be something that we have to do. It doesn't have to be, always something crazy, but maybe we need to be talking a little bit more about what we do during the week. The training to be an ICE agent, that's another comment. The training to be an ICE agent is approximately 4 to 8 weeks, 2 months total. Yeah. And it was supposed to be, depending on different reports, they were saying it was supposed to be 6 months. And what they did was they dialed it back to 4 to 8 weeks, if they get that, just so that they can continue to push people out. And I think now it's a little bit conspiratorial, so I know, I'm not a big conspiracy guy, but it's a little conspiratorial that they've decided to push it down to 4 to 8 weeks so that you can have people out here who are going to do the wrong thing. And you can just sit back and be like, well, they don't really know what they were doing. They, oh man, they breaking. So if somebody tells you to go, why don't you go pull these people out of the car? You don't have enough training to realize that maybe that ain't what you're supposed to be doing. Or why don't you go over here and just grab that person up because they brown and demand them to show you that they're citizens. That ain't really what you're supposed to be doing, but you ain't got enough training to know no better. And I think that's what they decided to do now. So they knocked that training down from 6 months down to 4 to 8 weeks so that they can make sure that you're not trained enough to know the difference between right and wrong. You're not trained enough to know that you can say no. You're not trained enough to know that this probably ain't for you if you have, a certain level of morality and character. And so that's what I believe. That's what I believe. But yeah, that's a good comment. Again, police officers, federal agents, you're not going out into the field with the limited amount of training that these ICE agents have. It would be ridiculous. It's unsafe. And so right now, I think it's ridiculous and it's unsafe. And so, really good comments. These are good comments coming in. So it goes to the point. I don't know how you feel personally about the church, but again, how I feel is, look, as the church, no, I don't think that it is right for people to want to try to come in and protest inside of the church to disrupt service. Not a good idea. Shouldn't have happened. Should these people be prosecuted? I don't think they were doing it in a hateful manner. That was the way that the laws were kind of set up. So I don't know. That's it's not really my arena to be able to say what's right and what's wrong. If it was me, it'd be more like, look, I'm gonna put y'all on notice. Y'all a little aggressive here. That's not what you're supposed to do. And if they go out and do it again, because you haven't really heard about somebody doing something like that inside the church. for the most part. But if somebody does it again, now you got to give them. It's so crazy that they're even trying to prosecute the journalist that was there, filming it, which is nuts. You never really prosecute a journalist for filming what's going on, and so that's how you really know that the government has kind of lost their way. It's just another example of how they lost their way. But the thing is, we can't allow that. So people, it's not a good thing to protest in churches. But I do think whether you are a member of the church or not, there needs to be discussions sometimes about how can you, especially for leaders, how can you be in leadership and this is what you do outside of the church? How does what you're doing outside of the church fit up with what's going on in the church? And I think as leadership, a lot of times people get offended when people ask them questions, but you shouldn't. You should be able to not have to, I don't have to explain myself. You shouldn't have to explain yourself per se, but you should be able to talk about how you live and what you do. If you were sitting here and you were a lawyer and you were a defense lawyer, a defense attorney, and you were a leader in the church, and they said, well, how can you defend criminals? How can you defend people who have stolen and assaulted folk and done this and done that and done this and done that? You should be able to explain how that aligns with your faith. It shouldn't be a big problem. You shouldn't get angry. You can't question me. I'm the pastor. You can't question me. I'm a elder in the church. You can't question. No, you should be able to say, hey, this is how it works out. Not a big deal. It should not be a big deal for you to be able to explain what's going on. And so should we question or have conversations with one another when we see things that don't necessarily line up? I think we should. I think we should. And both sides. I think we should, as members, be able to question others and have the courage to do so. And I think people in positions of power, people who are getting questions, you should be able to sit back and, in a nice, calm manner, be able to explain, like, this is how I see it. This is why I think that this works out. Or here's the struggle that I'm having. Because I can at least respect that, what's going on. Because a lot of people, we sit back, especially with young. I've seen it with young folk, and they'll sit back and they'll be like, man, I'm struggling because on Sunday I want to live like this. But the reality of the matter is I live like this Monday through Friday. And it's my struggle. If you can say that and we know that it's true, that's different from just sitting back up here and being like, I'm cool with it. And I think that's also where the protest may have missed the boat, because you don't know. That pastor could be struggling with it. That pastor could be having a crisis moment, and coming to him in a different manner may have been that moment of reminding him, like, hey, this is not where you're supposed to be. We can't just assume that he's just some person who enjoys hurting people, hurting immigrants, hurting families, destroying lives. We can't just assume that. So we got to think about how we do things. Another comment. Law officers, for example, know not to shoot into a moving car. ICE agents don't have a clue about law enforcement. By the way, the KKK Act of 1871 really does not apply. Yeah. That's good, because that's the acts that they're using, and that may be the reason. Reality of the matter is, these people may not get prosecuted at all, because between the KKK Act and the FACE Act, they're probably not gonna be able to get it off. So hopefully, I would think, because in my mind, I think that these are just some overzealous folk who are just upset about what's going on, and they're trying to figure out, how do we protest? How do we make a difference? And the conversation that we're having now is making a difference, even though I don't agree with the way that they went about it. So that's good. But yeah, you're right. Law enforcement, they have higher standards and higher rules, and ICE doesn't know that. ICE doesn't know that if a car, it's a shame. If a car is trying to move and you're kind of in front of it, step out of the way. You got their license plate. You know where they're going. If they're not an active threat where you think that they're going around trying to shoot people, you can get them whenever you want to get them. They're, especially somebody who's a citizen who where they live and where they work. You don't have to be shooting unarmed people and then claiming that because you were standing somewhere near the front of the car, that all of a sudden the car was a weapon. All right. So yeah, it's clear they, and that's the other thing that we have to come to grips with. At the end of the day, as bad as we may think some of these agents are, some of them are, and then some of them are just inexperienced and have no business being there. And the machine, how the government is working, put them in a place that they had no business being. All right, man, that was good. Thank you for all the comments. We've had our time. Just as a reminder, I think again, what we do here is what I think people should do everywhere. Let's have the conversation. Let's talk through what we're doing in our lives. Let's just have the conversation. And so again, if you are within my voice, you hear this and you're a nice agent, you need to probably have a conversation about whether or not you can do that and still hold a leadership position in the church. Still, does that fit with what you're being taught on Sunday? Does that fit with what's in the Word of God? The actions that you have to take during the course of the week. At least ask yourself the question. All right. As a reminder, on Thursdays, we have Thursday, our weekly Bible study. That's at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time here on Facebook and YouTube. On Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a time of worship service that is on Facebook, YouTube, and at the address on your screen if you're in the local area. And on Tuesdays at 7 o'clock from 7 to 7:45, we have a time of prayer. Please join us for all of those. And of course, we have Impact 2026. Thank you for everyone who's joined us, all the comments, and please join us again. Thank you. Have a good one.